Hi, I'm sitting here with John from Lifestyle Adventures. I'm going to be asking him about the accounting procedures he uses in his whitewater rafting business. Thanks for joining me, John.
Absolutely.
Um, so, as a whitewater rafting business, you are more of a service industry as opposed to merchandising type of business.
Absolutely. Most of our revenue is generated from the adventures that we do provide, and most of that is earlier in the season with whitewater rafting. We do have some merchandising in the store, but the majority of it is certainly the revenue comes from the adventures that we sell. Most of that is whitewater rafting, some float trips, a little bit of diving, but absolutely majority is rafting.
Okay. So, with the majority of your revenue coming from the service side, uh, how do you keep track of that, and how do you balance out your revenue and your expenses?
Yeah, so I guess we're fortunate enough because the majority of our revenue stream comes from credit card sales, and First Data is our processing agent. And we don't experience any fraud with that because it all clears before the trips are booked. So the client puts down a deposit, and we know what size groups they have, and um, that piece we're pretty fortunate on. It's not a cash heavy business; it's more of on credit. Um, from an expense side, we do have some expenses. Certainly, on the assets, we have our rafts, and every year we try to pick up a new raft or three. Our bigger capital expenses are towards a couple of buses and vehicles that we use to transport the groups and the parties upstream. And on the dive side, we've got a compressor that we use to fill some of the tanks. Um, we do have neoprene suits that we allow the participants to wear, so that all of that are goods that we have on our expense side that we depreciate. Um, and then that's a little bit different than the materials we sell in the store.
Okay. So, those assets that you need to purchase and that you use to service the customers,
Yep.
how do you handle the depreciation of those? Do you plan to sell them further down the road?
Well, no. I hope our business lives on long enough that we do not have to salvage any of that. Our accounting firm typically puts those on the books for between 5 and 7 years, depending on what it is, and they use some schedule that they have for that. They usually tell me what it is. Vehicles I think last longer than a raft or a canoe or a flat bottom float boat. Um, Certain items like oars tend to be expendable. Um, the suits that we have are on the books for a couple of years. I think they book it for 5 years. We usually get that plus out of them, depending on how rough our customers are with those. But we do rely on our accounting firm to help us with a lot of that.
Okay, so they let you know whether they're evaluating the inventory based on a straight line depreciation method or a units of activity type of method.
Yeah. So I know that we use an accelerated method for depreciation, and that certainly helps on the better years for the tax purposes. I know that we've been doing that since day one. They encourage us not to change that method. So once we started with that, we've maintained that accelerated depreciation on the goods we brought in that we put on the books. When they use a dollar amount of $1,000, anything more than that they'll put on the books as a capital investment. Anything less than that, typically we'll put as a current year expense.
Okay, excellent. And so you also gain revenue from your shop
Yeah.
on the site.
Yeah, minimal. So I'll call them employees that we have. We have three employees that are part of our business with Lifestyle Adventures, and then we have about 10. They're subcontractors, so they fill their schedule based on the groups that come in. the scout groups or the family groups or the business groups that come in and book these trips. So they basically schedule themselves around that. And when they have these groups in for an adventure, they'll bring them through the store, and things like sunscreen or neoprene gloves or booties or goggles, or if they want to buy their own helmet. Those are the goods that we typically will sell in our shop. And there's some smaller stuff, hand warmers and logo T-shirts and scarves and hats that we'll make a little bit on. But it's certainly there's something there, but not a ton.
Okay. So with that being such a small part of your revenue,
Yep.
how do you manage the inventory? How do you manage the possible theft and losses there?
Yeah, well, so we're fortunate. Very little shrinkage in the inventory that we have there. For the most part, we use a first in, first out. Some of the stuff like the sunscreens and the protein bars do have a shelf life, so we try to rotate that in and out. The vendors that we go through for some of those like expendable food items, they'll manage the shelf life of that. But it's important to use a first in, first out. Some of the longer term stuff like the neoprene gloves or the hats or the booties, we do rotate that stock because it does have some tendencies to dry out, but it's not as important. And then at the end of every month, we'll do an inventory of that. Now, primarily for restocking, but we also book that inventory on our books for our accountant.
Okay. So it sounds like they use a periodic inventory system. Thank you very much for your time, and appreciate all your help.
Absolutely.
All right.